Please join me in welcoming to the stage writer-director Rian Johnson. Special mugs. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the genesis and what made you initially sit down to finally write the script, because it was something that had been percolating in your mind for 10 years that you'd been thinking about for a little bit. So what was that final momentum and push that got you sitting down and writing it?
Yeah, it's been well, and thank you so much for doing this, and guys, thank you so much for being here and for staying for this. I appreciate you guys being here. It started with me it really is growing up reading Agatha Christie's novels and being a huge Agatha Christie fan, and loving whodunits. It all just started with me just thinking, I want to do a whodunit. I want to put everything I love about a whodunit into a movie. And about 10 years ago, I had the very basic idea for this, just kind of the structural idea for it. And after The Last Jedi, I was just like, well, this seems like this might be the right thing to do next.
And in writing the script, it seems like you mapped it out with the plot first. I know you've posted online some pictures of your kind of like straight line and here's all the different beats that we're going to hit. And then the characters came into that. Is that always the way that you approach writing your scripts?
Yeah, I'm really structural in terms of the way I approach writing. And so it can sometimes sound kind of clinical. It isn't really. It's a very organic process, but I do really start with that outline. And I spend the first 80% of the process figuring out what the structure of it is, figuring out what the movie is. I was going to say what it's trying to say. That's not quite right. What the theme of it is, what the question is that it's kind of chewing on, and then kind of figuring out from there. And then I come up with the details to suit that. The original idea for this one was it was actually like a very kind of like, this will be interesting. Someone just throw something at me if this is not interesting, and I'll stop. I'll move on to the next topic. But it was a structural thing. It was... I love whodunits. I'm a whodunit junkie. I also kind of agree with Hitchcock's assessment of the potential weakness of a whodunit, which is a structural one. It's a storytelling one. It's the idea that basically the problem with whodunits from Hitchcock's perspective is it's a lot of build-up to one big surprise at the end. And narratively, that's kind of, from his perspective, the cheapest coin possible. And I understand what he means, because if the whole thing is just gathering clues and different suspects and did this person do it, did that person do it, and then the satisfying thing at the end is, oh, this person did it, did you guess it or not? It's like, well, maybe I guessed it, maybe I didn't. That's actually not that interesting. That's why Hitchcock was all about suspense, not surprise. And so he was all about leaning forward in your chair as opposed to leaning back and stroking your chin and thinking, can I figure this out? So the initial structural idea was, how do I get everything I love about whodunit into a movie but put kind of a stronger engine in the car? And so how do I start a movie as a whodunit, turn it into a Hitchcock thriller, and then turn it back into a whodunit at the end, kind of revealing that the whodunit had been hiding underneath the thriller the whole time, and that the thriller itself was kind of a misdirection in a way. So that was kind of the initial just genre wonk-like idea behind it, yeah.
I mean, one of the other things that's really interesting about the structure of a whodunit is you have the present day where we're watching that happen, but we're also flashing back to the night in question. And so do you think about those two things side by side as you're writing, or do you write it in a more linear fashion and then kind of pull it together? How do you kind of figure that stuff out?
Oh, no, side by side. I mean, in a way, it has something in common with the time travel genre in that way. I mean, it's also a way that's interesting. I mean, the golden age of kind of detective fiction, or like whodunits as we know them, began with literature, began with John Dixon Carr and Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers, and it began on the page, which is interesting to me because what you're talking about is such an integral part of the pleasure of a whodunit. That last 30 minutes where you're getting all the little flashbacks and where you see the weird different perspective shifts of who is telling the story and what does that mean to how you're seeing it. That is uniquely suited to cinematic language. That's something that cinema does easily, just with a little stroke of its pen, whereas on the page it's a little more laborious to do. So it's interesting to me because it's something that I dearly love, I think about a lot, and I've done in other movies that weren't even whodunits, and it's something I really loved like putting together in this.
Yeah. And given the number of characters that you're servicing, do you have kind of a personal review system where you step back and you look at each character individually to make sure that they're fully fleshed out and fully part of the story at every point?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other tough thing, especially about squeezing a whodunit into a feature, into something that's close to 2 hours, is just making sure, because you need a broad enough spectrum of suspects, and you need to, especially when you're casting actors that are as stellar as the actors here, you don't want to shortchange anyone. You want to give everyone their moment. And at the same time, it's tough because you just have a limited amount of real estate. So it was a big process in terms of figuring out, okay, how do you service each of these characters just enough, but how do you still ultimately tell your story? It gets crowded very quickly.
And it's such a unique challenge in terms of directing as well, because you're having to block these huge scenes with multiple actors, and it's not that some of them are in the background, they're all having their moment within that. So how did you figure out that logistical challenge? Because that was something new for you in this project.
Yeah, that was a fun thing for me. Is it was the first time, a lot, I've done stuff with crowd scenes before, but it's a different thing having a crowd scene. And usually you have 2 or 3 actors who are the focus of the actual scene that you're shooting. And that's a very different thing than having a scene like the will reading scene, or the scene where they're all fighting with each other, the eat shit scene, where it's really 8 actors interacting, and figuring out how to block that, figuring out how to cover it so you weren't spending all day doing laborious coverage, and figuring out how to really highlight what the main thing of that was, which is just all of these amazing actors listening to each other and playing off of each other. That was a big challenge for. I mean, every movie you learn so much, but for me, that was the big postgraduate course.
Yeah. And in watching it, it very much feels like we're watching the whole film through Marta's eyes. And how did that influence and impact the way you thought about the placement of camera and the way that you were going to follow the other characters?
Yeah, camera's all. Everything in filmmaking is about perspective. It's about, in every scene, knowing whose perspective you're seeing the story through and why, and making every single choice, whether it's costume, whether it's set design, whether it's camera placement. Everything is based on communicating to the audience whose perspective you're in, and then putting them as effectively as possible, meaning the audience, into the emotional situation that a character's in. So and it's you're right, it's Marta for most of it, which that's kind of straight from the Christie. I think maybe on paper the temptation is to say that the detective is the main character, and to say that, well, if you have Poirot or Miss Marple, or in this case Benoit Blanc, that you're going to want to be through their eyes. The truth is, if you look at Christie's novels, but if you look at any of the great mystery writers' novels, even going back to Conan Doyle, even going back to Sherlock Holmes, it's never told through the eyes of the detective. That's why Watson exists. There's always a secondary character, or in Poirot's case, it's Captain Hastings. And it's funny, in Columbo's case, it's the killer. That we obviously stole from Columbo with this, but in Columbo's case, the quote unquote protagonist, the one whose eyes you're seeing it through, is actually the killer. It always starts with. And anyone who's not familiar with Columbo, it always starts with showing you the crime and showing the killer doing the crime. Columbo doesn't show up until 10 minutes into the episode, and you usually stick with the killer for a large part of it. And Columbo is almost like the villain in a slasher movie coming around the corner, like, hey, just one more question. And the killer's like, ah! Then you're like, and you have this weird the Hitchcock thing, the Norman Bates and Psycho thing of like having that queasy feeling of narratively everything is telling you that the dramatic weight of this is the killer going to get caught, and instinctively you have the feeling of, oh no, is he going to get caught? And you wait, but he's the killer. It's that weird whiplash. That was another interesting thing to this, is by doing that, but having it be Marta. The thing of, can we do the Columbo thing, but have the killer be someone who the audience genuinely, not just in that queasy, morally conflicted way, but genuinely wants to get away with it, where the killer is absolutely in the right, and the moral thing is for her to get away with it. And the interesting thing about that is it then makes the mechanics of a murder mystery, where the detective is going to catch them at the end, it makes the very mechanics of the genre into the antagonist of the story, which to me seemed like a really interesting thing.
I was reading an interview where you were speaking about how working with Anna, who plays Marta, that the way that the two of you would figure out some of the choices for Marta was her asking the question, what's the strongest choice for her? And I was curious about kind of some of the other questions that the other actors on set would ask about their characters that were really important in terms of figuring out those moments on set together.
Yeah, I mean, it was really important about it, especially I think because for a lot of people, their closest reference in terms of this movie is Clue, and I love Clue. I think Clue is a really fun movie, and Murder by Death also. But Clue is I would say is a parody of the genre. Clue is a straight out comedy, and again, I love it. But we were trying to do something different with this. With this, we were trying to skip back to Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, Murder on the Orient Express, Last of Sheila. We were trying to do a straight-up whodunit. And that meant that even though we go very big in this movie, ultimately it had to work as a movie. Every single character in it had to be grounded enough to where, and you need really good actors to do performances that are this huge and still feel like they have a foot on the ground to where you're still invested in the story. So Jamie Lee Curtis, for example, we talked about her emotional connection to her dad, and I think even though it's not like a heavy drama, it's a very fun movie, and it's a very kind of in some ways it's an arch film, but it's also incredibly important that at the same time the emotional attachment to her dad and her genuine anger, you have some connection to it. It has one foot on the ground at least. So that was very important.
And also you're working with such a wide scope of actors in terms of their technique and their approach. You've got someone like Edie Patterson, who is very involved in the improv world, to Christopher Plummer, who's more classic. So how did you kind of step back and navigate the way that you would be directing them all in a scene, given those different styles and techniques?
Well, I mean, the one unifying factor with all of them is they're just fucking great at their jobs. But every single actor in this movie is just a absolute beast. And you're right, they work in very different modes, and to a large extent, the only job that matters as a director is showing up on set and figuring out what each actor needs you to be for them and being that for them so they can do their best work in front of the camera. But at the same time, it was, for me, it was a joy on set every day. I mean, everyone clicked in very quickly. I think because everyone also had the reference of, had some reference in terms of what we were doing. This is a genre that everybody, in different ways, but everybody kind of has some degree of love for, and so everyone clicked in very quickly to what it was.
I know that you've been open about, you at first didn't think that Anna de Armas on paper was going to be the right fit for Marta, but the moment that you read with her, you really saw her and she became that character. And kind of what you learned either in that moment or through prior projects as to why you still brought her in, about the importance of still always taking a look at an actor, even if they don't seem like they might be the right fit initially. Yeah,
it was, so Mary Verneau, who just won an award the other night for yes, Mary Verneau. She's incredible. She's amazing. We worked with her since Looper, and she's fantastic. And she's a true collaborator. And she's the reason Anna de Armas is in this movie, so I will owe Mary for the rest of my life, because Anna is really something special. And but on paper, it's I don't know if you just. So Mary, I had seen Anna in Denis' Blade Runner movie. I'd seen her in a few other things. I knew she was good, but she wasn't really on my radar. And Mary brought her to my attention and said, "You have to look at this actor." And of course, the first thing I did was Google her. And if you just Google Anna, because she's just stunningly gorgeous, you'll get all of these, glamour shots of her. And I looked at just the Google images. I'm like, is this really the character of Marta? And then Anna came in, and I met with Anna and instantly got it, both in terms of her skill as an actor and also just, I don't know, Anna genuinely has a good heart, and she's genuinely a good person. And she has absolute no bullshit kind of she doesn't play games. It's just there's an absolute sincerity when you're talking to her as a person. And I really think that comes through on screen. I think that's the sort of thing that is a one-to-one translation. And I talked to her, and then we read a few scenes, and I just kind of instantly got it. And and God, every single day on set. Also, I mean, besides how good she is in the film, the confidence. You look at the rest of the cast, and you look at, I mean, how daunting that would be as someone who is not as established as the rest of those actors in that cast, to come in and step into what's really the center of the film, and to, in many ways, carry this film. And Anna came on set, and I'm sure it was really hard. I'm sure she had all these she came on set, though, with a confidence and just stepped into that role and took it and owned it. And I think that comes through in her performance. I can't say enough about her, and I feel so lucky to have worked with her.
And in the filmmaking process, obviously, once you cast the movie, you give your actors the script, there's a period of time where they're off working and coming up with their own background and crafting that character in their own mind. Were there any elements of characters that came into play through the work that the actors had done on their own that you maybe hadn't envisioned originally when you were writing the script?
Oh, every single actor elevated was on the page to the nth degree. I mean, Toni Collette showed up and had that just we did. It's not like we did extent. It's not like I wrote pages of backstory for her. It did she showed up and just did that, and I was just, my jaw hit the floor. And after the first take, she's like, too much, and I was like, no, keep going. And so every single one of them, with Michael Shannon, I'm just, again, when you have actors of this caliber and you are essentially just kind of letting them loose to play. And I mean, the only limiting factor was just, does it still feel real enough to where this isn't going to tip over into just being a joke? And because they're so damn good, though, it was amazing how far we could go without it hitting that point.
Yeah. And in terms of rehearsal, there was actually only one scene that you had rehearsal for, which was the one with Anna and Thrombey upstairs, where they're figuring out the logistics of the evening. But everything else, that it sounds like there wasn't really a rehearsal process for. Was that really because of the caliber of the cast, or more to do with timing that you had in production?
No, that was timing. Yeah, no. I mean, you guys know. And also, it was an incredibly quick prep from the moment. So this is 2018. I started writing the script in January. I had the first draft by June. We went to Daniel because his schedule opened up because they pushed the James Bond movie. He suddenly had a 3-month window. We went to him in September. He said yes. And from the moment he said yes, and we were making the movie, the moment he said yes, we had, in order to hit the end of the year when we had to be done, we had to start shooting in 6 weeks. And we didn't have a cast. We didn't have it. So we just basically had to go 0 to 60 in 6 weeks. And so we barely had time to get our actors, let alone rehearse with them. And again, luckily, we had these actors. And so, they were able to pull it off. But yeah, Christopher Plummer, I never know what to, even when I'm talking to him, I've turned it into a joke and started calling him different, Colonel Plummer or Admiral Plummer, because he's always call me Chris. I'm like, I can't call you Chris. You're Christopher Plummer. I can't do it. But he was actually the one who was I think it'd be good if we sat down and just talked through literally just the business of, I go here, I do the injection, we talk here, I stand up. And he was entirely right. That was actually the one scene that really benefited from rehearsal.
And this was the first film that you've taken a producer credit on, and then you're also launching a production company right now with your producing partner, Ron Bergman. What was the genesis of you finally wanting to step up to the plate and take on that additional responsibility on your projects, and then to start this company where you're also going to be looking at other people's projects?
Well, it was, I don't want to oversell Ron Bergman, who's my producing partner, Ron is, I wish you were here tonight because I could embarrass him by complimenting him, and that's always really fun. He's the reason I'm still making films. He's extraordinary, and he has an incredible, the number one advice I give to any new filmmaker is try and find, if you have the producing muscle, that's fantastic. If you don't, like me, find yourself a great producing partner. Find somebody who's going to come up with you and who's going to be in your corner and who you can trust. Because Ram is the reason I'm still making movies today. He's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. So that having been said, when we're putting the thing together, when we're kind of we're basically partners in that process. But in terms of producing, Ram is always doing the heavy lifting. We started this company, and I've always just kind of written my movies and then made them. And the idea of expanding beyond that and getting to learn from working with some talented people who work in totally different ways than me. I mean, that seemed really exciting to me.
And kind of going back to some of the logistical challenges of putting this film together, you and Ram have been working together since Brick, which you filmed for under $500,000, which is nothing. And I imagine that must have been a really challenging shoot in itself. So were there elements of things that you learned on that film that really came into play when you had that limited time frame on Knives Out?
Well, I mean, yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the truth is, I mean, you guys who make movies, it's just, and I think it's true any scale, whether it's Brick, whether it's an episode of TV, whether it's a Star Wars movie. The truth is, you're gonna do best when you're prepared, when you show up, when you do the work in advance, and you know what story you're gonna tell, and you show up on the day, and you've done the work when you show up. And I think it's weird. It's a scaling thing. I mean, in one way, like doing a Star Wars movie, you have a 6-month shoot and you have all these resources. In another way, the reason that you have those is because what you're doing is that much bigger. And the truth is, it's this weird thing where it's weirdly it's weirdly one-to-one in terms of if you don't sit down and do the work and really know what you're doing when you show up every single day, you'll still get behind and you'll still be screwed. So I don't know. It's whether it's a $500,000 movie or a blah 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 $1 million movie or this movie, it's kind of the same deal. You just what you have to work with, and you kind of have to you always have to just kind of have your ducks lined up.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because I've been a little bit obsessed with this since I saw you post about it, is the way that you had a lot of actors in scenes who were wearing glasses. And in order to make sure that what appeared in their glasses was correct, that your lighting team and your key grip were setting up diffusers that would be shaped like windows that they would actually be seeing if there weren't the lights in the way. So kind of, is that something you've done in other films? Where did that process come about? How did you guys figure it out?
I don't know if anyone is on Twitter. Hopefully not. Did anyone see this? Yeah, it's a crazy thing. So my cinematographer Steve, who I've been best friends with since I was 17 years old. We met. He was still a senior in high school, and I was a freshman in college, and we've shot everything together. So he, we had a lot of characters with glasses in this movie, and he basically, I wasn't even really aware he was doing this, but he started, Matt Mania, who was our key grip, Steve and Matt started working together. And Steve's like, okay, we're going to have, we need this movie light, right? Like we're lighting you. We have a movie light where I'm at, basically, right? And if you're the camera and you're in a close-up, what you're going to see in the glasses, and you see this in every movie that's ever been made, is a big white square, and that's a movie light. And it's not a big deal. Everyone kind of knows. But because Steve is a lunatic, he became obsessed with this. And so he thought, okay, so, again, in the world of the movie, here's the light. We're filming you. I'm sorry, sir. We're filming you. I'm the camera. And there's windows back here. So Steve got our key grip to basically that big white like softbox that was our light. He made a forced perspective. You go on if you just Google like Rian Johnson Twitter. I know there's a way to find this. I think I posted pictures of it. He made out of black masking tape basically a forced perspective 2-dimensional thing that is the shape of the window that would be back here. So it's still lighting the actor, but when we're filming them, the tiny little 1/4 inch but visible reflection in their glasses looks like the window. It's completely insane, and he did it again in this weird forced perspective way that like bends my mind. I can't even really wrap my head around it. So, but Steve's a maniac. Yeah, Steve's crazy. Yeah.
And having worked together for so long, but this being the first project that you were shooting on digital versus film together, was there kind of a way in which the shorthand between you really lent itself to the fact that you were working in this new format and having to think about things technically a little bit differently?
No, because the only real conversation was in prep, and the conversation was I'm a film guy. It's a religious thing, and I think it's something that is. It's spoken of in religious terms almost amongst like filmmakers, like the idea of shooting film, and there's something special about that. And that I'm very, very torn. Because I've shot everything up till now, and this is the first entirely digital film that we've ever shot. And the decision to tell Steve, and Steve is incredibly invested in I don't know how to start talking about this without talking about it for half an hour. But basically, Steve's whole perspective on it is, and the thing is that's infuriating is that he's right, is that at this point in the terms of imaging technology, the look of a film, whether you're shooting digital or film, is not created in the capture medium, meaning whether it's Alexa or film or Red or whatever. It's created in the post pipeline. It's created in the color correction, in the way that you process the raw data of your image. That is really where the look of the film is created. You can do anything you want to in that realm. And Steve's entire pitch is basically that saying that there's something magical about the format you create on, as opposed to you as an artist are taking control of the image in the post pipeline and making it look exactly the way you want it to look, is turning yourself from an artist into a consumer. It's saying the brand that I choose at the start is what determines the look of my film, not me determining the look of my film. And again, it's infuriating because he's right. And there is one single shot in the movie that is on 35 millimeter film. For my birthday, I walked onto set, and he had gotten Panavision to send out a 1970s blimped Panavision camera, and we shot one close-up of Daniel in the movie. It's in the film, on 35 millimeter film. It's in, I will never tell which shot it is, but it's in the last segment in the library. It's a close-up of Daniel. It's there, it comes, it goes. I'll be damned if I look for it every time. I'm like, yeah, that son of a bitch, yeah, he's right. So, and there are lots of advantages to shooting on digital. And so it's I don't know, it's a tough thing. You can tell I'm still conflicted because I love film. Sorry, I talked about that for a while. I apologize. But
I wanted to jump to a couple of questions that we got from the audience. The first one being from DDR Stewart, who's asking about how important you feel it is to make short films or several short films working towards a career in directing in today's industry.
Oh, it's paramount. It's everything. Not several. Make 100 short films. Every single. If you're starting out, don't worry about them being good. Don't worry about them being shot on high quality anything. Don't worry about having good actors. Just make stuff every single weekend. Go out with your friends and make a movie. If you don't have friends, use your camera and use a sock puppet and make a movie. Honestly, it's. I feel like the temptation is to focus on how do I break in, how do I get an agent, how do I blah blah blah. The truth is that's putting it all backwards. Really, your only job when you're starting out is to find your voice and get more and more comfortable telling a story with a camera. And the truth is, whether you're shooting with a Alexa 65 or whether you're shooting with your iPhone, those are the exact same tools. And what matters to you as a director in terms of learning how to tell a story visually and how to cut it together, how to make it compelling, where you put the camera and why, it doesn't matter which one you're using. And so your iPhone's in your pocket. Take it out and use it right now. And just, I'd say, make as many shorts as you possibly can. Yeah.
And this next one is from Pamela, who's asking about the rumors that have been going around about Benoit Blanc films, and was this the plan from the very beginning? But I'd also love to ask, kind of like, going towards that, what do you feel are some of the most important aspects of his character to continue fleshing out as well?
Yeah, from the moment I wrote this, I was like, God, if this does okay, maybe we can keep doing like more Benoit Blanc movie. That'd be really, really fun. And then, but I mean, the thing is, though, I feel like it's really important, actually, and I'm kind of like, starting to wrap my head around writing it right now. And one of the things that I think is really important is it's like another Poirot novel with Christie. It's not a sequel to this. And the other thing that I think is a potential trap I think you have to avoid is it's not about world building. It's not about filling out his character. It's not about learning more about where he comes from or whatever. No, what's compelling about it is the mystery. What's compelling about it is exactly is the the suspects and the fact that he comes in as a detective, and maybe you get little breadcrumbs of his story. But to me, what's truly fun about it, because what I came to this from is not like loving the character of Benoit Blanc, it's loving murder mysteries and loving whodunits, and the idea of it's such a malleable genre. There's so many different things you can do with it. The idea of just trying something new with that and doing another murder mystery with him as a detective. I mean, that sounds like fun.
One of the things I love about our industry is the way there's so many opportunities to learn through osmosis, through the people that you're surrounded by. And I'm curious if kind of going through award season and being with all these amazing contemporaries of yours who are also incredible writers and incredible directors, if there's things that you've picked up either about their craft, the way they approach it, or specific details about writing or filmmaking just from being around them for the last few months.
I mean, that's been one of the incredible, of like all the pleasures of being kind of like unexpectedly kind of in this thing is like just getting to, because it is kind of like with the filmmakers that are in kind of the nomination pool or whatever you want to call it. It's like you're it's like you're touring with a band a little bit. You see them at all these different events. You do each other's Q&As or certain DGA Q&As. Like I got to I interviewed Noah Baumbach. I interviewed Greta. I interviewed director Bong, and I got to like ask them questions, and but more than that, just getting to kind of getting to meet them and know them along this process. It's incredibly fun, and they all. I mean, it's less about like kind of even like getting lessons from them, because we all work in such different ways. It's more about these are awesome people who are doing just like some of my favorite work today. It's like really, really cool to get to just kind of know them and sit down and talk about movies with them,
And as you look back at Knives Out now, is there a specific scene that maybe at the time felt like it was really challenging to execute in terms of the logistics or the filmmaking that you're just really specifically proud of above the rest?
And I mean, I don't know. I stood up there in the back and like watched the last like half hour of the movie with you guys, and the whole like last Benoit Blanc explaining everything, and that was that just because there's so many little pieces of that, but that's kind of the big reason I wanted to do a murder mystery. I just love the denouement scene where the detective explains it all. But what I really love is, the point of the reason we made this, the whole starting point of this movie was I want to make something that I would sit down in a theater and just have a blast watching. And so sitting back there and hearing you guys and like have fun watching that last section of it, that's it, man. That's like that's why I thanked you at the beginning of it. Like that's the whole reason for this thing being in existence. So it's all you guys. Yeah. So, anyway, that's it.
Well, thank you so much for making this wonderful film so we could enjoy it. And
thank you guys,
thank
and thank you again, and thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.